Can the US troops enter the territory of Ukraine? The answer seems to always be no. From the very beginning of the war, Washington decided to give any help except for sending the US military to Ukraine's territory. Will this line change now? And where do all this talk and assumptions come from? Is this a signal to Moscow, or could Biden administration policy really change? I'm Oleksii Matsuka, and let's figure it out. The 101st Airborne Division of US Army is now deployed in Romania, right on the border with Ukraine. This unit is just fabulous. It was formed back in August 1942. It participated in the Normandy landings. 8 decades after those events, this division, also known as the Screaming Eagles, was sent to Europe again. About 2,500 soldiers were redeployed to Romania, Bulgaria, Hungary and Slovakia to protect NATO's eastern flank. Most of them stand now on the very border with Ukraine. But there is a very strict order. They can't even step into Ukrainian territory. After all, if at least one American military man suffers, the US will be instantly involved in this war. And the Biden administration is trying to avoid this scenario. So why this unit is on the air today? A report issued by the American CBS channel has changed everything. Its correspondent visited the unit and spoke with the command. He learned that the US military drill was meant to recreate the battle Ukraine's forces are fighting every day against Russian troops just across the border. That's in fact they are working out contraction to Russian troops. But what surprised us the most was that article contained the words, "The US military is ready to fight tonight." Here is how the reporter put in.
The Screaming Eagles commanders told CBC News repeatedly that they are always ready to fight tonight. And while they are there to defend NATO territory, if there is fighting escalates and there is any attack on NATO, they are fully prepared to cross the border into Ukraine. CBC News Agency.
It's a big announcement, isn't it? Moreover, the American military doesn't talk too much. If they agreed to an interview and declared the possible redeployment to the territory of Ukraine, it means they received the green light from the command. We conducted a small investigation and managed to learn a lot of captivating details. I will talk about them a bit later. In the meantime, let's talk about another statement that came out on the same day as the CBS story. Former director of the Central Intelligence Agency, David Petraeus, gave an interview to the Express French Weekly. He directly stated that there might be some situations when the United States could take part in the war in Ukraine.
In the event of Russia's active actions, the US and the other countries might react in one way or another, but as a multinational force led by the US and not as a NATO force. David Petraeus, former head of CIA.
In fact, the official admits the direct participation of the United States in the war. They realized that NATO, where all decisions must be taken unanimously, will not dare to do this. But there is a new option for the response, creating a multinational contingent led by the United States. 2 statements were published almost at the same time, designed for different audiences. The statements were not voiced by the officials, but they were aimed at boosting interest. Maybe this is an attempt to test the water. How will the US residents react? And what would Europe tell? Or is it a signal to Russia? Moscow is constantly raising the stakes, threatening to use nuclear weapons, so this is our response to it. Now is the time to talk about the official reaction. American government agencies react with the utmost restraint. John Kirby asked the journalist what exactly did the military say, and then commented.
The president was very clear. We're not going to put US troops on the ground to fight in Ukraine. John Kirby, National Security Council spokesman.
State Department spokesman Ned Price was a little more wordy.
There has been no shift in the administration's position. Our position has been clear. We're going to do everything we can to stand with Ukraine, to stand for the rules-based international order that Russia is attempting to undermine and to contravene. We are doing that through the provision of security assistance. We are doing that by holding the Kremlin and its key decision leaders to account with sanctions, other economic and financial measures. But the president has been clear. We are not going to get into, certainly not going to seek to get into a war with Russia. What we are doing is providing Ukraine with what it needs to defend itself against what is clearly Russian aggression. Ned Price, State Department spokesman.
So did the military say something that didn't correspond to the official position? Or did the journalist get it wrong? It's time to tell you what we managed to find out on this issue. After talking with our US colleagues, we found out that the journalist who made the report is not a freshman. On the contrary, he is one of the most experienced journalists who could not make a mistake. And then it became known that the text was coordinated with the military in advance. That's the words about readiness to cross the border of Ukraine were not a surprise for them. They fully corresponded to the messages they wanted to convey. It will not be an exaggeration to still regard this as a signal of supporting of Ukraine, and first of all a signal to Moscow. It's impossible to constantly raise the stakes by threatening to use nuclear weapons or by taking about a dirty bomb. The US has a decent response if the situation develops to the extremes, and one of the options for this answer, at least theoretically, could be the redeployment of the 101st Airborne Division to the territory of Ukraine. It's a matter of crossing the border. Yes, the White House will do everything possible to prevent this from happening and to avoid escalation, as they did before by calling American instructors back from Ukraine or by suggesting that the US Embassy in Kyiv be gated but not by the Marines but by State Department diplomatic security officers. The administration is aimed at avoiding direct involvement of the United States in the conflict, and they informally admit this is a personal decision of the head of state. But everything has a limit. This is apparently what they wanted to demonstrate to the Kremlin. Military experts underline yet another detail. Sure, the key task of the US units deployed to Europe is to protect the interests of NATO. But in the event of a real threat, this interest can be protected not only on the territory of the alliance.
The protection of NATO countries is the core paradigm of the US troops' involvement. They actively promote this paradigm, but it's not written that the defense of NATO should take place in the NATO countries. They can also protect the alliance in foreign territory from which a blow can be struck. It's the Americans, the Pentagon. They will not wait for an attack on NATO structures. They will launch preventive strikes. Roman Svitan, military expert.
In fact, as our sources in Washington explained, the issue here is what could be classified as an attack against NATO or against one of its members. This is a serious decision. In fact, it's about how and when to start a third world war, and should it be started at all. For example, if an Iranian drone sent by Russia crosses the Ukraine-Poland border falling literally on Polish territory, is this an attack on NATO? Informally, it was decided that no. And what if, for example, as a result of a local nuclear explosion organized by Russia, radiation spreads to Europe? What would it mean? This will be perceived as an attack, and this message was already delivered to Moscow through some unofficial channels. The West is now building a checks and balances system to keep the Kremlin from irreversible steps. The deployment of US troops in Europe is one such mechanism. Apparently, a hint that they can go further was needed here, at least in order to start discussions such as possibility in Ukraine, in Europe, and in the United States. Well, what will happen further? We will discuss it in one of the new episodes here on UATV channel. Don't miss our videos, and thank you for watching.